Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am your host, Porfirio Rangel, and today is June 13th, 2025, Friday the 13th. I am joined by Henry Liu. Henry, I have a quick question for you. How do
Sure.
you define democracy?
How do I define democracy? Wow, okay. Well, this is a tough one right off the bat. Um, it is a form of government that is for the people and by the people.
Okay, yeah,
There you
I
go.
agree. And I'm also joined by Christian Diadamo. Hey, Christian, so what do you do when democracy is under attack?
Hmm. Oh, that's a big question. Let's see. Well, one of this show, start a rebellion.
Start
There
rebelling.
we
There
go.
we go.
And you
So,
know, rebellions are built on hope.
ah, ha, ha, ha.
Right?
And if you haven't caught on yet, we are talking Star Wars. Dun dun dun
Yes.
dun dun dun. Yes, Star Wars. And we are going to get a little political because we are talking Star Wars TV show Andor season 2 on Disney Plus. And this show is really great, but it does get really political. How can you not, you know? So let's just get right into it. So spoiler alert if you haven't watched it yet, but we're gonna talk some spoilers. So before we actually get into the show, we never really did have a episode to discuss season one. So quickly, what are your guys' thoughts with Andor season one? What'd you think of it? Christian, you want to start it off?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, season one was pretty great. I watched it last year, so it's still fairly fresh. It starts off fairly slow, but I think each episode kind of builds on itself really well. I think once they get to the heist, kind of midway through the season, I think the show picks up with I think the prison arc being like just like, oh man, this is like super intense. This is like super thrilling. I really got to see what happens next. So very, very highly recommend Andor season one. Really loved it.
Yes, yes. What about you, Henry?
I also really enjoyed Andor season one, and it kind of reminded me when I watched Mandalorian season one. It was like this great breath of fresh air, you know? I think with both Mando season one and Andor season one, it was like proof positive that Star Wars can succeed in a long form TV series format, right? So, because for a long time, Star Wars was essentially just movies, right? But with these two things in particular, I think Star Wars really proved its worth on TV.
Definitely 100, I agree. I've really enjoyed Andor season one. I didn't know what to expect, and it just blew my mind. My expectations were exceeded, and like you said, Henry, it, um, I just really enjoyed it. It was super awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about some of the characters. Let's talk about the main character, Cassian Andor. What are you guys' thoughts on him? Because I mean, this is not the first time we're introducing him. We were introduced him in Rogue One, but with the show, we understand how much of a complex character he is. So, is he a good guy? Is he an anti-hero? Like, what do you think, Christian?
Ooh, is he a good guy? Is he an anti-hero? Or has going all the way back to I guess Rogue One when he has like one of his big moments that he's talking to main character. I forget her name off the top of my head, but he kind of the way he talks about like this is kind of what the rebellion is. It's it's deceptive. You got to do some things you're not proud of, and he is a guy that he does do some things that you would say like this isn't like this is not a good person. He kind of just kills people in cold blood. He just kind of shoots without shoot first, ask question later. Um, and like he does like a lot of things you would think like a villain kind of would do. The show does start with him just killing two guys, two Imperial officers. Of course, there's more to it than that, and I think that's one of the strengths of the show is that it kind of shows Cassian Andor in this real like shade of gray, where he goes on these heists, he steals things, but like you also kind of see him as this Robin Hood character, who really fights for who fights for the common man. He stands up for what's right, and of course it is the Empire, uh, the like known evil that you see in the Star Wars movies. Like how bad the people he is up against. So um, even though he may not be the good guy that Luke Skywalker is, he's hard not to root for. So I want to say he's a good guy, even though he is. I feel like he does toe a bit of that line. But
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Henry? What are your thoughts on Cassian Andor?
Yeah. So first off, Diego Luna is absolutely awesome as Cassian Andor in this season, as well as his past appearances in season one and Rogue One. But yeah, the character is so great too, like Christian, you're saying he's a bit of an anti-hero. He does kill. He breaks the rules, Um, but he's like the perfect protagonist for this show because the themes of Andor are really, about revolution and rebellion and the fact that to succeed in rebellion, you do have to break the rules. You have to do some things that aren't you know very heroic and and sometimes just flat out wrong and terrible. You got to do bad things, and Cassian Andor is the guy to do this stuff. He does this throughout the whole series, right? um and he struggles with it at times. He's human like us all, but he realizes he has to do these things to do the right thing for the rebellion.
Yeah, going off what both of you guys are saying, like I think Cassian Andor is such a complex character. Like I guess ultimately he does good things, but the way he does it, it's not always like, the quote unquote hero way, the good way.
Yeah,
And so he's such a complex character. Like he has an interesting past and the way he handles the rebellion, it's like it's always you kind of question like, does he look after for himself or does he actually care about the rebellion? So yeah, he's an interesting character. He's also, I think, like a wild card. You think this is someone you would trust to be on your team, Henry?
100%. This is the guy I want on my team because like he doesn't kill like randomly, right? Everything he does is thought out, is calculated. He does the work. He calculates the risks and he makes good assessments, all that. And to some, what he's doing may seem reckless, but throughout the series, you realize what he's doing is very measured and thought through.
Okay, for sure. Let's talk about another one of his partners, Bix, also a love interest to Cassian. So when we left her in season one, she was kind of like dealing with being tortured, you know? So at the beginning of season two, you see that she's obviously dealing with some PTSD from being tortured and stuff. She's still learning how to cope with all of that. And you see her kind of just be involved with the rebellion. So what did you think of this character, Christian?
I like what they did with Bix. I think in season two, like at the beginning, they explore a lot of like this PTSD angle, with that like evil doctor. Um, and so like it's cool that you see like this character that like that's not something I think you've kind of seen in Star Wars, kind of these like kind of like a kind of personal toll that a lot of this takes that you do kind of see in the show, and you can really see how like evil the Empire is. I think that's a good way to drive it home. I think a really cathartic moment was in I think it was the end of episode 5 or 6, when she actually finds him on
Mm,
Coruscant and
hmm.
kills him. I thought that was a really great moment. And so I thought, she was a nice, like, kind of counterpart to Andor to kind of help, especially in the story in, season 2, where you see them together like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, she kind of tries to be like the voice of reason to Cassian in a way, you
Mhm.
know? So, Biggs, there's a scene in episode 3 that I think gets a little dark. There's an Imperial officer that comes to her house and essentially like he tries to make some sexual advances on her, she fights back. And it's in this moment that for the first time in Star Wars, we actually hear the word rape being said. She says that he was trying to rape her. And this actually got some backlash online from fans. Fans thought that this was too dark for Star Wars, that this wasn't family friendly. Do you have any thoughts to that, Christian?
Hmm. I would say Andor very much is an adult show. Like, I feel like this show, kind of more than anything, is that this is Star Wars for adults. Nothing about the show screams like a kid show, even though it is Star Wars. It's got lasers, but um, there's way less action. The plot moves a lot slower, and there's a lot of like boardroom meetings. Um, One of my coworkers has a little kid who's watched the Star Wars movies, but he's not showing him this show because it's much more complex.
Hmm.
And so like, and I think it makes every and I think it does make the world feel a lot, the complexity and the more adultness of the show overall makes things more real in a way. And I think having something like that is uh like seeing sexual assault and things like that on camera is so like utterly, like, I think, like, repulsive,
Hmm.
and then much more like, oh god, I don't want to see that, way more than any killing.
Hmm.
What what um and so that does, and I think that also kind of helps to kind of drive home how kind of evil the Empire is. And so the scene, of course, it's meant to bother you, and it's meant to make you go, "Ugh, I didn't like that." Um, and I can see why it's controversial, but I guess that wasn't something I would have. It doesn't bother me in, I guess, that way.
Hmm. Do you
But
have
even
it?
though it is very bothersome.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have anything to add, Henry?
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you asked this question because I definitely had some thoughts. Like you were saying, Christian, this show is a show for adults. I think there should be a disclaimer for this show. When we think Star Wars, we think lightsaber action and we think fun and Ewoks and porgs, This is not that show. This is not like one of the Star Wars episode movies, right? This is uh a show for adults. This is less action oriented. This is like longer form television, serious, dramatic. Definitely more of a thriller than an action show. Um, and yeah, like the adult stuff is like quite adult. There are themes of, as we've been saying, sexual assault, themes of drug abuse, themes of genocide. I mean, this is like heavy stuff, right? So yes, a great show, but like there's an asterisk here. Um, Star Wars fans are used to a certain type of entertainment. This is different, so I think folks should be aware of that.
100. Yeah, like both of you guys are saying, I feel like this Star Wars, this type of Star Wars is meant for like a mature audience. It has
Yeah.
complex issues, complex characters on a very grounded political storyline. This is not Skeleton Crew. This is not like you said, Henry Ewoks. This is totally different, and I think that's what makes this show really great, you know?
Yeah.
So let's move on to another character, Dedra, an Imperial officer. Henry, what are your thoughts on this, on her?
Well, yeah, not exactly a likable character, first off, but a key character and an important character in the story for sure. Um, yeah, like this show, not just season two, season one and two really dissects what is going on in the rebellion and definitely what is going on in the empire, right? The inner workings, like how do things become how they become, come, episode four, right? And you really get to see all the mechanics of it here. And it's because of people like Dedra that like the Empire became what it became, right? It isn't just Darth Vader, not just Palpatine, not just Grand Moff Tarkin, right? All the underlings, they're all like falling in line, and there's this order to it all, right? And Dedra is completely reflective of like all the all the yes men in the empire that led to this, right? And how things happen, right? It's all kind of done through fear and like the ambition of characters like Dedra that led to a lot of um the terrible things that the empire does.
Yeah, she's definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
Christian, if if you're describing Jedra to someone who hasn't watched the show, how would you describe her?
That's a good question. I think, let's see. Like, I think I would say, like, I feel like she kind of exists as she's the antagonist. She represents, I think, a lot of what the Empire is doing in the show. Like, I think as Henry was talking about, um, but she's also, she represents the system.
Yeah.
She represents the Empire and like as a structure, you know.
Hmm.
So I guess in a way, she's everything Andor isn't.
So let's move on and talk about Dedra's lover, I guess, Cyril. Henry, do you have any thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, like in the same vein, like we haven't seen characters of the empire like these before where uh, as cool as the character Darth Vader is, he doesn't seem like a real person, right? Whereas characters like Cyril and Dedra, like, oh, like these seem like real people. So it kind of makes you feel like, oh, like I can understand how like the Empire could really happen, right? The Empire
Mm,
is
mhm.
like such a fiction in, let's say, episode four, right? They're just the bad guys in black, right? Um, but when you see characters like these, it feels more real, right? And I'm sure we're going to get into this, but there are a lot of like real life parallels with this show and the world we're living in right now, right? And guess what? There really are people in the real world like Cyril and Dedra, and they're kind of leading to a lot of the things that are happening in real life right now. So it's like it's kind of grounding, right? When we see characters like this that we can relate to, and yes, we can all agree that they're not the best people, but we can relate to them and see real life people who are like them.
Yeah, there's definitely like some people I feel like I could literally point out in politics right now that are like Cyril. So we'll definitely get into that real life parallels
Yeah,
later on in this conversation.
yeah,
So Christian, I want to point out for Cyril that in episode 3, that's the episode where Dedra and Cyril meet Cyril's mom for dinner, right?
Oh yeah, they have that dinner scene.
They have that dinner scene, and there's a scene in there where while his mom and Dedra are talking, he goes to the bedroom and just lies down. Like has like he's like exhausted or something. He has like he's so out of it. And did you know that was actually pretty improvised? Like the creator, Tony Gilroy, asked the actor, what do you think Cyril would do in this moment? Like if he walked away from the table. And Cyril's just like, or the actor was like, he just needs a moment. And he just totally improvised that scene.
Really, huh? Because I think that is a pretty great scene. I really like that scene with him, his mom, and Daedra, where they're talking and like I really liked the addition of his mom and how like his mom just seems like someone he just wants a good life for Cyril. And I forget if it was that episode or a later it might be late. Oh no, it's later when they're say like talking about him going to Gorman, and she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Why would you go to Gorman?
Hmm.
I got you a really nice you had this really nice job at a desk on Coruscant, and what now you're like all the way over here in this like nowhere planet, you
Yeah.
know, and how like she can." But, like, it also seems, like, very real, I think, especially when he's just like, "Well, I c" he's just so exhausted from the situation that he would just go lay down, and he's not really he's definitely a character who really likes order, and he really likes structure, and he has
Hmm.
a hard time finding his own path, you know? And so, s he wants and of course, he wants this relationship, but he doesn't know how to go about
Yeah,
it.
for sure. Uh-huh.
So, I think him, um, and Dedra they make a nice like other side of the coin, like the two different sides of the empire that kind of represent what the empire is.
Hmm.
Whereas you have Andor and Bix show the two different sides, the different sides of the coin of the rebellion. I think there that are um season two is a really good like kind of parallel with both of those relationships.
Yeah, I want to ask that question about the relationships. Henry, do you think Cyril and Dedra really loved each other? Or do you think they kind of just
Ooh,
maybe used each other?
that is a good question because I asked myself that same question as I was watching this season. Um, yeah, I kind of think they were using each other because I didn't feel much attraction there. I felt like both of them were in it for their ambition to ascend the ranks of the empire. And there weren't that many like true feelings of love for each other. Yeah, I mean, maybe there was some attraction there, but like I think that was overshadowed by
Hmm.
their respective ambition levels.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I feel like there might be something there. I also think but because of, like, almost who they are, they're almost, there's a part of them that might be incapable of something much more true,
Mm,
and the
Hmm.
idea of and because they kind of just live in, you know I meant they kinda live and die for the Empire,
Yeah.
and Empire and probably themselves. So, like, especially when you kinda see this relationship fall apart in episode 8, kinda see there might have been something there how Dedra was like, "Let's just get out of here and let's just go live let's get out of here. We're gonna leave this." And I think when you see that, I think there might have been something there,
mm.
but at the same time, maybe the two characters are so far gone that maybe something may, even if there's something there, it would have never truly been possible between the two.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So before we move on from Cyril, like Henry, I think you had alluded to this earlier, but how would you describe the relationship between Cyril and his mom?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're very close. Too close, I would say. Um, yeah, she's ever present and very controlling in his life, let's say. And um, I think she doesn't have bad intentions. She's just a little bit too involved in his life. And I think this does go back to that relatability aspect I was talking about. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you see Cyril's relationship with his mom, yes, she is controlling and a little bit extreme, but it feels like the relationship a lot of people have with their moms, right? They have issues with their mom, and like the issues they have are like very common in real life right now, right? Um, and yeah, I liked how his mom was like she didn't feel like a Star Wars character, she feels like a character like from like a very serious movie, or not even a serious movie. She's pretty funny actually, like maybe a comedic movie, but definitely like not a Star Wars movie, right? So that was cool. I like that. Yeah, again, further grounding of the story. Like the mom really grounds the story.
Do you think that like all that controlling and being her being so involved in his life like comes like from a place of love, or you think like it's just the sense to be just in her son's business, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know. I
mean,
think it
oh, go
comes
ahead,
from a
go
place of
ahead.
love. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
I
just saying,
I
yeah,
agree.
I think it comes from a place of love. I think that, um, because I think whatever you're saying, it is pretty common, that kind of relationship. Um, and I think you can kind of imagine, like, I think like the way Cyril is, and then you kind of meet his like throughout season one,
Hmm.
where you kind of see the way he is, and then of course you kind of have this reveal later where you meet his mom, and you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
And you can kind of see his feelings. I think going back to that bed scene, where he just kind of lies down in exhaustion. You kind of get a sense for his. That gives you a good sense of like his whole relationship,
Hmm.
with her, and how he's just like, oh my god. But in a way, also kind of, he's kind of someone who probably feels very powerless in his life, you know,
Hmm.
which probably fuels, like we say, his ambition and his want to have this relationship with Dedra.
Cool. So let's move on to a senator, Mon Mothma. She's been kind of, behind the scenes working for the rebellion, but also trying to do the good fight for the people to just kind of like go against Emperor Palpatine's like policies and what the Empire stands for. Um, what are your thoughts on this character, Henry?
yeah. Mon Mothma is a great character. Um, she has maybe the best moment of the season when she gives her speech on Coruscant. It is very awesome. Not only does the actress Genevieve O'Reilly deliver like an amazing performance in that scene, but the writing is so good because everything that Mon Mothma says in her speech like reflects real life. Like she goes into like this whole culture of misinformation, and like, holy
Mm,
shit, this is the world we're living in right now for real, and like in so many ways, it's why this show is great because you see real life in the show, right? It is Star Wars and people are shooting laser guns and stuff, but somehow, some way, like, um, it reflects what's going on in the real world like better than like a lot of things that are more like more grounded that aren't like science fiction, right? So yeah, I can't say enough about like that speech. It's set up so well too. Like it was just getting the speech out there was like a challenge, right? And then getting her out of there um rescued and safe was a huge challenge too. So there were so many stakes, and yeah, it's a great moment. So yeah, great character.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that speech later because it is such an epic speech, like you said.
Yes, yes, yes.
But I just really want to quickly throw out there that there was an article that the actress said that right after the speech, a scene was made in an early draft where Martha goes back home and she sees her husband, and he's not angry. He tells her that he knew that she's been involved with the rebellion this whole time, that he is just sad that he never asked that she never asked him to help out, and he would have been willing to do that. But ultimately, they decided to not include the scene because they thought it kind of might have taken Martha's character a step back after delivering that speech. Um, Christian, do you have any thoughts to that?
Interesting. Ah, yeah, that's something to think about for a second that they would cut that. I mean, I really like that escape that they do after, because it seems like a very, um, after you do something like that, you kind of rile everyone up, and the empire's after you. So I like it's hard to imagine that playing out differently. Um, because it's also like it's your kind of more actiony kind of beat to the episode after the entire episode was like leading up to what this speech, and that being that's the big moment, and then there's kind of an actiony beat to kind of raise some of the tension and to show like that the plot is kind of things are escalating further from here. So I can imagine something like that also being a little bit too slow,
Hmm.
but I don't know, I kind of like that. um and like I think that would have that would have provided like kind of a nice moment for her husband, because I think before that she's just kind of aloof in her relationship. You just kind of see him here and there.
Hmm.
And so that I think that's like that could have provided a lot of depth. But at the same time, I think episode 9 is so good. I kind of like what they did instead.
Hmm. What about you, Henry? Any thoughts on not including that scene?
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before. Um, I mean, I could see why they would want to include that because it's sort of showing that a lot of people have good intentions and they support these, feelings of fighting the evil empire and whatnot. But at the end of the day, most are don't have the guts to actually do it, right? After she does it, the guy's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I would support you. You don't have to hide." But like after the fact, everyone is like on board and not afraid, right? But to actually do it, to make that step, that takes true courage, right? The things that Mon Mothma does, the things that Cassian Andor does, like these are true heroes, right? Because they are very selfless and they're risking everything, right? That said, yeah, I mean, I can see why they didn't include it because it seems kind of extraneous and um yeah, there was actually a fair amount of the show that I think could have been trimmed a bit in this season, notably in like the first half or so. Um so the runtime is already, a little long. So I definitely support like the decision to cut that.
Okay. So before we moved on from Martha, I really quickly want to point out this cool, fun scene that she was in episode 3. It's her daughter's wedding, and while the galaxy is falling apart, she's just drinking, living her life, and dancing. In that awesome like dance scene. It totally went viral. It went as viral as the Zemo scene in Winter Soldier and Falcon. And it got so viral that Star Wars even uploaded a 1 hour version of it on their YouTube channel. Did you enjoy it, Christian?
Let's see. I will say I think that's also the first time in Star Wars someone's gotten drunk. Am I like I feel like there's definitely Star Wars I've missed. Like, I don't know. Have you guys seen us like there's been bar scenes in Star Wars, but usually if you see a character drink, it's like a drink, you know? this is the first time you're like, that character's very much drunk. Um, and I think that scene is like a big scene for Mon Ma, how like she kind of just goes, F it, you know, I'm just gonna get drunk, and even though I don't really, because you could see how conflicted she is by her daughter's wedding.
Hmm.
Before that, how she's like, you don't have to do this. You don't have. By the way, like, you don't have to do this. I'm really sorry that about this whole situation, and you can see how much it eats at her, and so she does um go dancing. I will say I do think that is a scene that it probably went a little too long, because it's intercut with this big scene with the TIE fighter where Andor's like shooting people down with the TIE fighter,
Hmm.
and that's also like a very big scene, shooting people down. He's doing his rescue on that farming planet, and like that's such a big scene, but it kind of cuts between that and the dance just kind of keeps going and going
Hmm.
with the music. And I see how it's a big scene. It's a good scene, but I would also, yeah, yeah. There's also a point where I'm like, I kind of, all right, I get it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, let's move on to the final list of characters I want to talk about, and it's the duo Luthen and Clea. So, Henry, how would you describe their relationship?
Definitely a mentor-mentee relationship. Um, and even further than that, yeah, it's almost like a father-daughter relationship as we discover in the flashback episode later in the
Hmm.
season. Um, but yeah, mentor-mentee, father-daughter vibes for sure. Um, and also through the course of season two, we really discover how crucial these two characters are to the rebellion. Like they are arguably as important as Andor and Mon Mothma are to the success of the rebels, right? Um, and yeah, they're very behind the scenes, right? So they won't get the headlines in terms of like the action that we see Andor get into, but they are critical components to the rebellion.
Hmm. So, earlier we were talking about like how complex some of the characters are, like Cassian and Cyril. Luthen, I feel like is fits that bill perfectly. He's a very complex character that could do some bad things for the good of the rebellion. So, I think I had asked you this, Christian, before with Cassian, but do you think Luthen is a good guy? You know,
Hmm.
he's always making controversial, the hard decisions. He kills Lonnie, and he even is ordered to kill, or he orders somebody to kill Tay, who is Martha's friend, at the wedding. So, what do you think?
Yeah. So he is very similar, where he's kind of has to make the hard decisions. Do, he's got to drive the rebellion, and he definitely plays things from the shadows a bit. Like even Andor's like, I don't trust you. I don't like you. It always seems like every time he talks to him, he's always like, I'm out, I'm out, I'm out. Like you can tell Andor does not. He believes in the rebellion, but he does not like Luthen at all. But you can also see how um he's needed. How the rebellion doesn't really work without someone like him.
Hmm.
The more kind of he's like the espionage character, and like there's a really great scene in season one where he's talking to his mole.
Lonnie.
Yeah, and like the way that Lonnie's like, I can't do this, man. This is like too much. Like I'm like under too much pressure. And he's just like, no, you're in this. Like
Hmm.
this is what the times, call for. We need someone like you. And he kind of goes on this big speech. I
Hmm.
think that was such a great scene in season one. And it kind of I think it shows like kind of who he is, how he's also very charismatic,
Hmm.
and he makes this good leader, but at the same time he's so like underhanded that in a way, even though you don't see him do it as many, like he doesn't murder people like Andor does. He's definitely the character you trust a lot less. You feel like
Mhm.
he's always gonna backstab you at any moment.
Yeah. Speaking on that speech that you were referencing in season one, I read an article that the actor actually like did that scene like 10 or 15 times because he says he just really wanted to get it right. He said the writing was fantastic and he just wanted to deliver the right um energy to what that speech was supposed to represent.
I can see why. That is like one of his big moments.
Yeah. So, Henry, we see an episode where, like you said, it's a backstory episode to both Luthen and Clea. And so when the actor who plays Luthen was approached about doing like an origin story for him, the only request the actor had was he didn't want it to be like a revenge stereotype storyline. Do you think that it was or wasn't?
Yeah, I didn't think it felt like a revenge story. I mean, yes, he was part of the Empire before, and like he basically rebelled against the Empire because of like the horrors of his time with the Empire, right? So, yes, him being part of the Empire led to him becoming a rebel, but yeah, I don't think it was exactly a revenge story so much.
Okay. And Christian, Elizabeth Dula, who plays Clea, this was her first major acting role outside of acting school. Like legit, she graduated acting school and then she was offered this role to play Clea. Like,
Oh, huh.
what do you think of her performance?
Oh yeah. That's pretty much where she starts. I liked her. Yeah, I thought I did like her. I think she worked pretty well with Luthen. And I think that scene, because if I'm trying to remember the scene, like whenever it was like at the end of episode like 6, where um there's the art piece with that's like
Mm,
circular.
hmm
Yeah,
hmm
and she's trying to pull the device from the bottom of it.
hmm
And like while trying, there, I thought that was a really great espionage scene. I thought she did a really good job. She felt pretty at home with at home, in Star Wars with this show. And for someone's first real like big acting project, I thought she nailed it.
Yeah, she killed it. You'll see in the later episodes of the season that she really, really killed it. So let's talk a little bit more about the show now. So each three episodes, there's a time jump of a year. Henry, did you think that that was wise to go at that kind of pace? Was it too fast? Was it that there was a lot of content that could have been like delivered without going at a time jump? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it worked. Like even going back to season one, they told the story in chunks, right? Like it'd be like a few episodes would be like a sub story, and then another few episodes, and then another few episodes. So season two was just like that. It just so happened that there's like you were saying, exactly 1 year between sub stories, right? Um, but yeah, I think it gave the season like this cool like grouping, right? It was like, yes, there are what, 12 episodes in the season. Um, but like it's exactly like 3 episodes per chunk, right? It's almost like you get 4 movies in the season, right? And yes, like the season works as a whole, but it is cool that like you can sort of like watch it in components like that. So yeah, like I think we've already been saying this, but the writing on the show is so good, and like the storytelling is solid. So I have no complaints in terms of like how the story was unfolding.
Cool, cool, cool. So here's a question for either of you. So during this show, we see some familiar faces from Rogue One, like Saw Gerrera, Orson, the droid K2SO, and then there's even mention of Tivik who meets up with Cassian Andor at the beginning of Rogue One, and mentions
Mm-hmm.
of Galen Erso. But some other characters are not seen, like Jyn Erso and Darth Vader. And some fans seem to have been upset about that for not mentioning those characters or having introduced it to have a stronger connection to Rogue One. So, according to an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, Tony Gilroy said that, like, writing Vader is just so limited, and it was just never in his plan to write the character. So, does it make sense to not include these characters?
I'd say so. I think I'm very glad they didn't introduce Darth Vader into the show. Because the show's trying to be so grounded, you know? It's meant to be grounded. You're meant to see the inner workings of the Empire. And one is that Vader's such a big name that I feel like if you have Vader, the whole thing would warp around Darth Vader. Like, and you don't want that to kind of overtake kind of what the show is doing. And Darth Vader's kind of, um, he is like the walking bad guy with the laser sword at times. I think his scene in Rogue One, while it's awesome, that's kind of like the thing people talk about when they talk about Rogue One
Hmm.
is, oh, you got to see it. There's this awesome Darth Vader scene. I feel like that's almost like the first thing that people kind of take from Rogue One is that scene, and I think it kind of, in a way, you could easily have Vader overshadow it. And two is it's like, yeah, like I don't think he'd really work in this kind of narrative
Hmm.
because he's also such an overpowering people. You want to see the system work as the system,
Hmm.
and I think when Vader's there, he kind of would warp the system around him. You know, um,
No, that makes sense. What about you,
yeah.
Henry?
Yeah, 100% agree. Thank God Darth Vader's not in Andor season two. Like Darth Vader's in everything, right? Like Anakin was in the Ahsoka show, and Darth Vader was in Rogue One. Darth Vader was in Obi-Wan. Like, okay, let's just like pump the brakes on that a bit, yeah. Um, this is not the Darth Vader story. This has nothing to do with the Skywalkers at all. So like, yeah, thank God he wasn't in it. And I think it was a good call to to not have the other Rogue One characters you mentioned, right? Because uh, kind of like what Christian was alluding to, it can be distracting. Like, would it have been cool if Galen Erso or Erso appeared? Yeah, but like it could be a big distraction. And like, neither character met Andor prior to Rogue One. So why even mess with that, right? The same goes with like a lot of the other characters in Rogue One. So I think there was enough overlap to be like, oh, cool, like some cool Easter
Hmm.
eggs and cameos and whatnot. But they didn't overdo it. And I thought they made good choices there.
Uh-huh. No, I 100% agree with what both of you guys are saying. So, towards you finish the show and you still see some characters that are still alive. You see um Will, and you see Mon Mothma and other characters that were originally in Andor, but not you didn't see them in Rogue One. And so fans have just been asking like where are these characters? And so there has been like this like little online kind of Easter egg thing saying that Mel is actually one of the characters in Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, that she's that one lesbian rebellion, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ah,
And people say that there is such a like similarity in how they look. I'm honestly a little annoyed that it's like, why does there have to be a connection? Like this character is this character or whatever? But what are you guys' thoughts? Like, is this her? Does it need to be her? Henry, do you want to start it?
Yeah, I see the link you just sent us, and they do look alike, these two actors. I will say that. And you know, they just both happen to be part of the LGBTQ community. But look, they have different names. Like they're not supposed to be the same character. I think it's just fans making that connection and wanting that connection to be there, right?
There's a theory to that. The theory is that like she just kind of wanted to like restart her life and not be really associated with Luthen, so she like changed her name to be still be a part of the rebellion.
Yeah, well, that's fine and dandy, but I feel like it's a reach, like,
Yeah.
oh, like this character is lesbian, so it must be the same character we see later on, right? Like, why can't there be like another blonde woman lesbian character in Star Wars, right? Why has it got to be just one, right? I think it's better that there's more than one, right? I think it's better if they are two different characters.
I feel like they did the same thing in same Rise of the Skywalker with Lando. Like another black actress, isn't it? And somehow maybe she's his daughter, you know?
Oh, right, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
But what about you, Christian? Do you have any other thoughts?
Like because I think this is the rebellion. This is about kind of establishing an entire army, and so I think you can also just kind of and because the what they're following up is from the 70s and 80s. You
Hmm.
know, the kind of big war that they're leading up to the Battle of Yavin, which they have like this countdown to in the show BBY. Um, the Battle of Yavin was from a movie from the 70s,
Hmm.
and so I think it's kind of a thing where maybe of course there's always going to be more Star Wars, but if you kind of take it as this is kind of it, as far as the lead up to these characters, like well they join the rebellion, they fight in the rebellion, you might not see them later, but you can kind of imagine them among Luke, and maybe they died here, maybe they died on the Battle of Yavin, maybe they died later on in Hoth, or maybe they fought there and survived, and or maybe they went off to live their life. So you can kind of picture them in like as later background characters in the story that you kind of get to know in this story. But I think I think that's fine if you don't get a full resolution
Hmm.
um to a character in this prequel. I think for prequels you do have to be a bit limited because you are a bit constrained by the stuff that comes after. And so I think they do a good job to make you care about it. They make it feel like they expand everything.
Yeah.
And so um like that's part of the fun of it, is kind of speculating what happens next. I guess that is it's Star Wars, so speculating on what comes next kind of comes with the territory.
Also leaves a lot of room for future projects, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm. So a lot of complaints that this show Andor had, both season one and season two, was that there wasn't any Jedi, no lightsabers, barely any acknowledgement of the Force. Basically, they were just saying it's slow, and that this isn't Star Wars. Like, what are your agree, disagree, Henry?
Well, like I was saying before, this is not like the Star Wars we're used to, right? And thank God for that. Like, we know about Star Wars fatigue, right? It's the same shit over and over and over again, right? Jedi's, lightsabers, all this kind of stuff that we've gotten over the decades, right? Thank God this is different. Thank God this is a detour from all that. Um, I get it. If you're really into Star Wars, you love that stuff. I love that stuff. I love a good Jedi Sith lightsaber duel, but this is a totally different story. And Star Wars doesn't have to be just one thing. It shouldn't be just one thing. It needs to be something different, especially right now when I think the world really is looking for something different, right? Um, so yeah, you know how I said, thank God, Darth Vader wasn't in Andor. Thank God there are no lightsabers in this. Thank God there are no Jedis and no Sith. Um, there is, in fact, some reference to the Force, though, right? So there is that, and while I'm saying all this, the show is still very true to Star Wars, the legacy and the universe of Star Wars. I think for sure the aesthetics of it and the themes and the attention to detail. Like the writers know like where in the Star Wars timeline this show takes place, and they really um, pay attention to all those little details, the technologies and whatnot, the alien creatures and the droids, all that stuff. This belongs in uh, the the long legacy of the Star Wars mythology for sure. Um, but it is very different, and again, thank God for that.
I
Yeah.
guess go ahead, Christian.
Oh, sorry. I guess I was just gonna agree with Henry that it is good that this is uh different, that you do see that more adult version, and that they aren't afraid to kind of show something much slower. I will say that I think Henry kind of alluded it is a little too slow in some parts, but I do think that it's great that they do kind of stick to their guns, and they really kind of show you everything is kind of very methodically written. Um, where you kind of see the way one thing plays into the next, and how the empires and the rebels react to each other, and it like kind of grounds you have a grounded story. And I think lightsabers and the Force would have, I think, diluted that, um, and made everything feel a little less real. I also think that by not showing that, by kind of shying away from the Jedi, from the Force, um, it kind of it helps give this its own identity. And I think that it kind of I think there is a time where there can be a little too much of that in Star Wars, you know, like the universe is so big, there's so many stories you can tell,
Hmm.
and there's so many different aspects, but when you kind of just focus on a little too much on the Jedi and the Force, um I think some of those elements do become stale, and I think they kind of have become a bit stale,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in terms of in terms of Star Wars. You have all the movies or several shows that feature the Jedi and the Force and the lightsabers, and some of those I think are I think in recent years we haven't liked as much. So to have something like this, uh, kind of really helps freshen the brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Star Wars fans, you can never please them, right?
Correct.
So, so Henry, you were talking, you kind of brought this up that the Force is mentioned in this show. There's a really cool moment in episode 7 when a Force healer approaches Cassian Andor and she kind of like helps him out. And she just has this small conversation with Bix that that she calls Cassian a messenger, that he's destined for something great. Like, what'd you think watching this scene?
Oh, that's a good question because um, I definitely had thoughts at the time, and I definitely have thoughts now. At the time, it was a little bit like, oh shoot, we're going to the Force shit now. Like, is this where the show kind of jumps the shark, because like we've been saying, the show is so grounded and it feels so real. Like, why do we got to get this space magic shit in now, right? But as it turned out, it didn't really like go that route. We didn't see like Cassian bust out a lightsaber or something, right? it was really just a plot device to get to um the real meat of the Cassian Bix relationship, right? And that's what it's sort of like the tragic love story of the show, where these two people are genuinely in love. They would no doubt be happy with each other, living a peaceful life. But there's that thing, right? Bix knows that Cassian needs to be part of the rebellion, and he needs to be part of it specifically without her, right? And this sort of this moment where like it's almost like this fortune teller thing, right? Um, that's when she really realizes like his importance to the rebellion, right? And uh, it's such a powerful moment because uh, it makes that romance even stronger, right? It's sort of like, oh, they would be so good together, but they can't be together, right? It's almost like Peter and MJ, right? In order to be Spider-Man, he can't be with MJ because he puts her life at risk. Yeah. So yeah, it's so great. It's like it's kind of an old storytelling technique, but it still works. You know, it's that tragic romance thing. So I love it.
Yeah, it tugs to the heartstrings.
Yeah. Oh, you're muted, Porfirio.
It does 100%.
Yep.
So there's a character that's introduced or reintroduced in the show that we've seen in Star Wars films, and that is Senator Organa. You know, we've seen him in episode 3 and um yeah, all the I think the prequels.
Yes.
And even in Rogue One, he's even in Rogue One.
Correct.
But he's always been played by Jamie Smits. In this show, he's recasted and played by Benjamin Bratt. So, Christian, did Benjamin Bratt do justice to Senator Organa?
Let's see. That name sounds familiar. Ben Bratt. I feel like I've seen him before. Um, oh yeah, okay. I think so. I liked his performance. Let's see. Senator Bail Organa. Um, let's see. I'm trying to think. I guess he didn't stand out as much to me in the season. So off the top of my head, I'm just like, okay, was there like a big scene? I'm trying to think of like his big scene. But I wouldn't say it was bad. I think like um yeah, I guess mostly he sticks out because of the name Organa, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess like I thought he was fine.
What about you, Henry?
Yeah. I didn't know why they recast, but I just looked it up. Apparently, Jimmy Smits had like a scheduling conflict.
Scheduling conflict,
So,
yes.
these things happen in Hollywood, but it is pretty unfortunate, right? Because if Jimmy Smits hadn't been in Rogue One, I think it wouldn't be that big a deal because, yeah, Jimmy Smits was in the prequels. But if they recast the character for Rogue One and Andor, that would kind of be fine. But the fact that Jimmy Smits is this character in the prequels and Rogue One, but it's Benjamin Bratt in Andor. That's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like they don't look that much alike, and kind of different acting styles. So it does kind of stick out. It does kind of stick out. That said, I agree with Christian. Benjamin Bratt was good in the role, and the character it has stuff to do. He's not just there because he's like Princess Leia's dad. He is like instrumental in getting Mon Mothma's speech out there, right? He's like a big part of that. So yeah, the character's good, the performance is good. It's just weird. It's just it's kind of like Rhodey in the MCU, right? It's like what? Like this guy looks totally different. What happened? But anyhow, it happens. These things happen in
Now,
Hollywood.
For me, I honestly felt like it was a different character. I wasn't sold on Benjamin's performance.
Mm,
I just feel like Organa in Rogue One and the prequels, he was very much like very forward with trying to do the right thing. And I just felt like this character, Organa, was kind of like more, a little bit more reserved. Like he was a little bit more like cautious about like jump making the leap, you know? Like there's that episode, episode 9, where he's like he tells Martha that like, "Oh, I'm not ready to go to Yavin yet. I'll meet you later." Like he's totally stays behind. So I just feel like to me, it just feels like a different character. Maybe it's also the actor. I don't know. It's very noticeable. So maybe that's it.
mm.
So I want to have a little discussion about episode 8. Who are you? This is the episode where we see Gormans assemble in the plaza, and they're basically gunned down. It's a total um like play that the Empire does to kind of give them an excuse to murder Gormans. It's a very powerful episode. I cried watching it both times I watched it. It's very reflective of what's going on now. It's so relevant and modern. Very quickly, because there's a few scenes I want to talk about, but I just want to get your guys' thoughts. What thoughts did you have while watching it, and then after you watched it? Christian, you want to start off?
Yeah, it's definitely an episode. We talk about how real and grounded. It's almost the episode that feels a little too real, if you think about, I know what's going on with protesting, um, and things that you're seeing on the news. Um, and you kind of see that, and I think the way the episode framed is that the entire time something really bad is about to happen. The way you kind of see all the pieces kind of come into play, and as the protest moves forward, you know. And I think that you also kind of know that they kind of allude to it very heavily, um, um, the way the empire is talking behind the scenes and the way they're orchestrating the that in a way this is like kind of playing right into their hands. So you kind of know that something is like, oh god, what's going to happen? And so there's this rising tension throughout the entire episode that is really great. I think this is like one of the standout episodes of the series. Is because of just how, like, I think powerful it is, especially when all hell breaks loose. Um, and so um Yeah, it is very hard to watch. I will say it's such a hard episode to like kind of sit through, you know.
Hmm. What about you, Henry? What was going through your mind while watching it, and then how did you feel after watching it?
Yeah, I agree. This is a really good episode. One of the best in all of Andor. Yeah, like you get it all in this one. Yes, there is this real life aspect to it, but there's like a lot of great Star Wars action in it too. We see Cassian Andor in action, and we get the action adventure thrills of it, but you also get this like very heavy, serious, real life parallel aspect of it too, right? So when I watched the episode, and really all the stuff on Gorman in general, I definitely thought of like some real life stuff, right? Namely, the Israeli occupation of Gaza. I think that's no not a coincidence that I thought that. I think that was quite intentional. Um, and then in the and also, and not just, yeah, not just the current Israeli occupation, but like historical stuff too. Like, I think the people of Gorman specifically weren't made to look like Palestinians, right? I kind of got a French vibe from that. So I read it as another parallel of real life in the past, the Nazi occupation of Paris in 1940. I don't think that's a mistake either, you know? There's that. And then subsequently, with that episode in particular, where we see the massacre, right, where the Empire literally massacres the people of Gorman, like that. Um, well, at the time, was reminiscent of the Kent State shootings in Ohio in
Mm,
1970,
hmm.
and then subsequently very reminiscent of what just happened in Los Angeles like days ago, right?
Hmm.
um the LA protests, um where thankfully it didn't end up in a massacre, but it very well could have, because what the troops were doing in LA recently were exactly what the Empire troops were doing in this episode. It's crazy, like how like close to real life this was, and the LA protests hadn't even happened yet, right? It's just crazy how like life reflects art and art reflects life, right? So tons of real life parallels in this episode, not only at the time but subsequently as well, so it's pretty wild. But like, we've already been kind of gushing over how good this show is, but like this show is almost like a must watch to like really get a grasp of what's going on in real life. And like, if you don't like to get your news through like traditional journalism and whatnot, watch Star Wars, like watch Andor. Like you'll find out what's really going on through fictional entertainment. It's wild.
Yeah, time and time throughout human history, we see like what a dictatorship looks like.
Yeah.
And it just so feels like that nowadays, with like you said, all the protests going on and this current presidency
Yeah.
and the way the government um has like certain policies and stuff like that. There is a few scenes that do give joy and hope during this episode though. We this is the first time it's supposed to be known that we hear the phrase rebellions are built on hope. You know, Cassian hears it from the clerk at the hotel. Um, so like it's cool like that how it's dark, but there are also small moments of joy. Do you have anything on that, Christian, hearing when you heard that, like rebellions are built on hope?
Rebellions are built on hope. Yeah, I think that's a good way to, in a way that kind of sums up Star Wars, almost as a whole. The original trilogy, A New Hope.
Hmm.
I think it's definitely like, I guess rebellion and hope are kind of the two words you kind of almost they're like, or just so synonymous with Star Wars. And I think that's a good way. That is a really good phrase to kind of tie all of Andor together, and kind of how you kind of see all this darkness kind of happening with the Empire, and you see this extremely effective Empire that you just you really hate. Um, and you kind of see that's kind of isn't I think that's also hope is the final line of Rogue One, where you see Leia's
Hmm.
cameo.
Hmm.
So it leads into A New Hope. And I think it even though their efforts might feel futile at times, um, because you see it's a way for them to kind of stay in the fight. It's a way for them to kind of see the bigger picture.
Yeah, yeah, it's what keeps the rebellion alive, you
Yeah,
know?
and rebellion alive and the characters going. Cool.
Yeah. Henry, did you notice, because that event was televised, there were reporters there, but they were using unique terminology. They were calling the Gormans terrorists, insurgents. They were saying that they provoked violence. It's so modern to how you see it, like you said, with today's LA protests and everything. There's a lot of media headlines that saying that these are riots, that these protests become violent. Um, did you notice that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The misinformation is real. You know, it's happening in the world right now. It's happened historically. It's happening in the Star Wars universe as well, right? So, yeah, I definitely noticed that, with the media coverage in that episode. Um, but I know we're going to talk about Mon Mothma's speech later too. But before Mon Mothma's speech, other senators gave speeches too, right? Which were like right along these lines,
Hmm.
where they're like accusing the Garmins of being terrorists, of being troublemakers, what have you.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's another big theme of the season, uh, finding the truth, what really happened,
Hmm.
and getting past all that misinformation.
Yeah. So, Christian, I want to talk about this one particular scene. During all this madness, all this massacre, you see a shot of Cyril just kind of standing there looking in shock. He kind of, you know, previously he kind of confronted Dedra, like what was happening. He like chokes her and it's like, what's going on? And he just feels so betrayed. Like, what do you think was going on through his mind during that moment?
Yeah, like you can kind of see like because he's kind of someone that lived, as we said before, he's someone who kind of lived for this system, and that was like kind of the
Hmm.
way that he was kind of able to grow, and he's kind of given his life to the empire.
Hmm.
Given his life to the empire. He loves Dedra, and like he kind of sees kind of what that leads to, and how even before he's on this planet he doesn't want to be on. He's kind of not in really a position he wants to be on. Um, and he's kind of doing these things that to him don't make a lot of sense. You know what's going on as the viewer. Um, but he kind of sees this all unfold in front of his eyes, and how before he's talking to that guy that he throws on the ground. He just like he can't believe it. He can't believe kind of what he's hearing and what he's seeing, and he kind of knows it to be true.
Uh-huh.
And like he kind of it's almost this moment where he kind of realizes, oh, I'm the bad guy here.
Do, do you think he had like any like regret in that moment
I
of seeing what he did contribute to that? Do you think there was any regret in him?
I think so. I think that makes for a good moment. He kind of like he kind of regrets what he's done. He sees that kind of what the suffering that it leads to, the suffering and the death that he kind of contributes to, and he and he didn't know, or he didn't want to believe, maybe. But and like he also sees that as an extension of his relationship with Dedra, which is
Hmm.
why he like almost kills her, and like she tells him like hey, let's walk away. Let's just walk away. Let's just leave right now. You and me, we can have a nice life together. But to him, it's too far. It's just like, I can't handle this anymore.
Hmm.
And even though he attacks Andor, I think like right after that moment where he almost kills her, rather than Felinda walking away, he goes after Andor, who's trying to who was trying to kill her in that moment, who almost, he almost shoots her.
Yeah. No, yeah, I want to talk about that. So Henry, like Christian was just saying, like there is a moment where Civil attacks Andor and they go at it, and then Cyril gets the gun and he's about to shoot Cassian, and then Cassian's like, "Who are you?" Like he doesn't remember him, you know?
Yeah, yep.
And so he puts his gun down and then he gets shot. And I read an interview that the actor believed that Cyril in that moment just kind of like questioned his life, like, like what did he do with his life? Did he cause the massacre of the Gorman people? Did he do anything? Because like Cassian didn't even remember him, you know?
Yeah.
So it he's kind of having like this like moment of realization, like, what did I do with my life? So w- do you feel for him in that moment?
Oh, that's a good question. So in the moment, yeah, I think for sure there are feelings of regret and like what you said, what did I do with my life? Right. I think there's also this thing of like, here's the guy he's been looking for forever, and he's got him dead to rights. He's got him, right? But then when he says, like, who are you? Like all of a sudden it's like this guy who has been so important to me, who has driven me, who's driven my life's purpose for so long, doesn't even know who I am. Like it's like I mean that probably blew his mind also. So there's a lot going on in his head. In terms of like, did I feel sorry for him? Like I gotta say no, because you know, okay, so this really boils down to like some of this real world stuff we've been talking about. So like both Cyril and Dedra, like we've been saying, are like kind of grounded and they feel like real people. They remind me a lot of the news stories we've been hearing about lately about people who voted for Donald Trump and are now feeling the ill effects of that presidency. Like you hear about like a
Mm-hmm.
business owner whose workforce is decimated because all of his staff has been deported,
Hmm.
or like maybe a different business owner whose expenses have gone through the roof because of the tariffs, etc., 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 etc. You hear so many of these stories, right? And guess what? I cannot feel bad for these people because this is what they wanted. They
Mm-hmm.
voted for the guy. So how can I feel bad about that? So the same goes for these characters, right? Right. So you should have known what you were getting into, right? You
Mm-hmm.
dedicated your life to the Empire. So what happens when the Empire does their thing? Like that's what you deserve, right? So I cannot feel bad about their fate. Cyril is killed. Dedra does go to prison. But as relatable and grounded as these characters are, I 100% did not feel bad for them.
Well, okay. Here's a follow-up question about Cyril, because when the show starts, back in season one, was it Andor kills two Imperial guards? Of course,
Hmm.
they were harassing him. You want Andor to kill him, but that's kind of what kicks off the event, and Cyril's just kind of that's when he starts looking for him, because he's kind of looking into this, and he kind of keeps pressing because he thinks, oh well, that's right,
Hmm.
killed him. I need to look for him. That's justice. Um, and so what if Cyril was a character who didn't even kind of know kind of what he was a part of? We know what the Empire is, the viewer. There might be some scenes that I'm kind of missing. But like, what if he was just someone who's so affected by, say, like heavy propaganda of the Empire growing up, and he kind of just thinks that he's just upholding the rule of law?
So what you're asking is like what Cyril was doing was he believed to just be like the common norm. He didn't know if it was good or bad. It was just what he grew up with, what he knew. So that's what you're asking, right?
Yeah. Do you think that? even do you think Cyril really knew what he was a part of
Mm,
and just kind of realized it too late? Do you think he realized that he was a cog in in the empire that you know led to the empire, or did you think that it could be like I said, it could be just he could be so influenced by propaganda that maybe he just believed what he was doing was right based on what he's seen,
mm,
and you kind of see his relationship with his mom and how like okay, well this is like what led to a good I thought I was living, a good life.
mhm,
I'm not going to say Cyril is a good person. I think that
mhm,
he does have this weird obsession with Andor, and in season 1 he's got a weird obsession with Dedra. And I think that um there's a good I do think it does lead him to kind of a darker path, but
Yeah, I see where you're getting at, and
yeah, what do you think about
yeah,
that?
like I think if that was the case where there was this like naivete with
mhm,
him, it's maybe I would feel bad for him. Much like, you know, if there are certain supporters of a political party who were indoctrinated at a very young age, at like as young children,
mhm,
maybe it's like, okay, well, they couldn't help it, right? But with this character with Cyril as well as Zedra, I felt like they had opportunities, they had knowledge that they knew something was fishy, right? And they just kept going. Like we've been talking about it. Like Dedra like had this thought like, oh, maybe we should just like just get out of this situation. Let's just leave. Right? They knew something was fishy. It's like they weren't completely naive, right? So my argument is that okay, um, they knew what they were getting into, right? Hence, I don't feel bad for them.
My, I
Yeah.
think, going off what you're saying, I understand where Cyril's coming from. If that's all he knows, like he's just doing his job. Like you said, season one, he's after Cassian because he killed two Imperial guards. He's just doing his job, trying to close the case. I don't have the same sympathy for Dedra because Dedra knew the plan. She knew what the Gormans was going to happen to the Gormans. She knew the planet was going on with the Death Star. Sidril didn't. He was in the shadows about it. That's when he confronted Dedra about like what's going on, and he started choking her. So I do, I guess, agree that he may have been like coming from just a place of what he knows, and maybe realizing what he did is wrong. But like Henry was saying, it's just too little, too late. Like the the action's already done, and it's becoming a snowball effect. So I still don't really have any sympathy for what happens to him.
Hmm. That's fair. But I think that's also just kind of what makes like these characters so great
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely.
is that you can have these characters that don't that's what makes them feel three-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my last question regarding this episode, Henry, is for you since I asked you earlier about the relationship between Sivril and his mom, the relationship that they have.
Mhm.
There's a scene where you see her cry, they report on the news that there's a lot of people who have died in that scene, and she probably has some kind of like motherly instinct that something happened to Cyril, so she just starts crying. Like I know me and you both said we have no sympathy for Cyril, but what about for his mom?
Oh yeah, I definitely have sympathy for his mother. We were talking about this earlier where it's like, um, does her controlling nature come from a place of love? I think generally we do think it all comes from a place of love. She genuinely loves her son, and yeah, she is a bit controlling, but yeah, it's all from a place of love. And yeah, it's almost like validated when we see her crying, right? We feel like, oh my God, like she really does love him. And she over anything is concerned for his well-being.
Yeah. So I want to propose something for you guys. We've never done this before, but how would you, out of 5 stars, rate this episode?
Oh, just this particular
This
episode.
particular episode, Henry.
Oh, episode 8,
Yes. Uh-huh.
the Gorman massacre.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, shoot. I mean, we've been saying that this is one of the best episodes of the entire series, so how can I not give it a 5 out of 5?
Okay. Christian?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll agree. 5 out of 5. I think it's expertly written episode. I think this is probably the episode. This probably is one um the best one of the series, or one of the best. Episode 9 is also great, and then from season 1, I also really love the prison escape episode
Hmm.
and the heist episode. But yeah, I would say this is definitely a 5 out of 5. Definitely a real crowning achievement for the season.
So I also give it 5 out of 5. I wanted to dedicate a whole little conversation about this one particular episode. So there's a lot to digest, a lot to um, extract from, and it's just a really, like Henry you said, it's a really good, well-written episode with complex characters.
Hmm.
So let's move along. And so we've been talking about this all episode. Let's talk about the speech in episode 9 that Mon Mothma gives. It is so good. Like, my voice isn't that good, but let me just say a few lines from that episode. So she says, I believe we are in a crisis. The distance between what is said and what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. The, tr- the death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil. When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. What took place yesterday, what happened yesterday on Gorman was unprovoked genocide. And the monster screaming the loudest, the monster we've helped create, the monster who's going to come for all of us soon enough is Emperor Palpatine. And
Ooh,
so phenomenal writing, phenomenal acting. What did you guys think when you guys heard that, Christian?
yeah. Um, Also, definitely one of the best episodes of the season and of the show. Yeah, I think that it does work as a really great centerpiece of the entire episode. Um, like, I think it is powerful. I think it kind of gets to the heart, and I think it's the heart of like the show and the conflict. Um, I'm trying to remember. I don't think they've talked about Palpatine at all leading up to it too. So I think that was
Hmm.
also a nice little name drop
Hmm.
Yes.
for the greater, for the universe. That was a nice little, in a way, Easter egg, but it doesn't really feel like one. Um, and I think it kind of goes against kind of the things that you're hearing that the other senators were saying, about the Gormans that you were mentioning earlier, Henry. So yeah, also one of the best, I think, moments of the show right there is the speech.
Henry?
Yeah, it's great. I had mentioned it earlier, but Genevieve O'Reilly is amazing in this scene, and the writing of the speech is phenomenal. It is thought-provoking, makes you think of a lot of real-world stuff, and it's rousing. It gets you fired up, man. Um, Also, Christian, you mentioned the Palpatine name drop. That was cool. But also because the setting is the exact same setting where Palpatine gives his big speech in Revenge of
Hmm.
the Sith, right?
Yeah.
And it's like so cool, like the polar opposites of these two speeches, right? And we've been sitting with that one for say 20 years exactly. And when you think about it, it's like, oh man, it's like it's almost kind of disgusting the moment when Palpatine declares his galactic empire, right? But this is like the big counterpunch to that, right? She takes down uh Palpatine and deconstructs this, as I mentioned before, culture of misinformation, right? So this episode is great in so many ways, and this speech is great in so many ways.
100. It's one again, this is Emmy worthy writing, you know? It's a great speech. Fun fact, you know how during that episode it's mentioned that somebody is gonna transfer Mon Mothma to Yavin?
Yes.
So that's actually an episode in Star Wars Rebels. Ezra's team flies out to Coruscant, rescues or extracts Mon Mothma, and then they take her to Yavin. And during that
Oh,
travel, they she gives another speech of addressing the galaxy of what just happened and stuff.
cool. Very cool.
So this is my way of saying you guys need to watch Star Wars Rebels.
I got it.
So toward towards the end of the show, there's a lot of unresolved storylines, such as Cassian never finds his sister, which was like the first thing that was introduced in the first episode. Um, B never sees Cassian again, which is something he wanted to see in episode 1 of season 2. How do you feel about these stories, some of these storylines not being resolved? Did they need to be resolved, Henry?
Um, oh, that's a good one. I didn't think of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, based on the fact that I enjoy the season a lot, and I did feel like they got to wrap up all the key stuff, in my opinion. So I didn't really have any problem with any you know, unfinished business.
Okay. Christian?
Yeah, like I think you had mentioned before, I forget if you talked about it earlier in the podcast, but that um this show was meant to be like several more seasons.
Originally, the original was for this series to be 5 seasons.
Yeah, 5 seasons. So, yeah, if they had 5 seasons, I could imagine they kinda had started writing something like that, and they probably had an idea for it to be something that would have resolved, had they had all 5 seasons. But since there's only 2, that's something they probably had to cut. Um, it doesn't feel like although, like, when you watch it now, it doesn't really feel like it that it moves too fast or that
Mhm,
there's too much on the cutting room floor.
mhm.
Um I guess it's also, that is sometimes a part of TV. Sometimes things are just kind of left to be unresolved.
Yeah. So, um, this if this series taught us anything, is that like the rebellion wasn't just like Luke Skywalker coming in, blowing up the Death Star. There was so much history, so many people that gave up their lives to make the rebellion what it is. Luthen, gave up his life to find out what is deliver the news about the Death Star. Cassian, as we know, dies in Rogue One, giving up his life, so the Death Star plans are given to the rebellion. There are so many key players that die for the cause, against the fight, um, of the Empire. Watching this series now, in the larger picture, how does that make you feel about the rebellion, Henry?
Yeah, I think it's cool. Like with Rogue One, you get all this cool backstory on episode 4, and then with Andor, you get all this cool backstory to Rogue One, right? And it enhances everything, right? The story is really enhanced in so many ways. Like for example, in episode 4, um, you just are briefly exposed to the fact that the plans were stolen, and then they construct their assault on the Death Star based on those plans, right? But it's almost like a throwaway line. It's like, oh yeah, we got these plans, right? And then they based this whole movie on like what all that entailed, right? And then similarly, like this one character in Rogue One, Cassian Andor, they built a whole TV series on the sky. So it's really cool. And I do think that Rogue One is like an enhanced experience after watching uh, Andor, and watching episode 4 is fun to watch with the knowledge of all these past events, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. Like, um, part of me, maybe just a small part of me, is like, um, why are they messing with certain things? Like, um, but these are done so well. Like Rogue One and Andor, they're done so well that, um, they don't taint the original material, right? Yeah, like I said, it enhances it more than it taints it for sure.
Okay. Christian?
Yeah. I think to that point, I think one thing Andor I think does really well is it feels like a really good midpoint between 3 and 4,
Mm,
episodes 3 and 4. I think it
Yeah.
it really bridges the gap between those two. I think part of it is feels like visually, like it feels like it's its own visual thing. It's own piece of Star Wars, but I think it kind of blends together the more high fantasy vibe of the prequels.
mhm,
And you go back to the Senate room in Coruscant and all that. But it also kind of has a bit of that scrappiness,
mhm,
of the original trilogy.
mhm,
And so I think it does it like and you kind of the way you see this rebellion kind of form from like just like these kind of disparate characters and the way you kind of see it kind of form and the way it all kind of comes together um in Rogue One.
yeah.
Um and so I think all of like I think it does a great job of that. It makes 3 and 4 feel so much more kind of cohesive together,
Mm, mhm,
Hmm.
kind of blending the two like visual styles, blending the two different stories, especially because they're also, so many years apart.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that is the like another strength of Andor is kind of how it kind of fits into the Star Wars canon.
Mhm,
Oh, hey, last little tidbit there. I think a really good example of like the thoughtful enhancing of the source material is in Rogue One, where they explain why there's this like fatal flaw in the Death Star, right?
mm,
So
mhm,
like, I love, love, love episode 4. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. But after watching that, it's almost like, why is this like invincible battle station, why does it have this like really terrible bug in it where if you just like set off a little bomb, the whole thing blows up,
mhm,
right? It like doesn't make any fucking sense. But actually it makes sense now because Galen Erso purposefully set a
mhm,
little booby trap in there, right? As we find out in Rogue One. So that's like a really thoughtful thing where it doesn't take away from the original movie, but it enhances it. It kind of explains
Yeah.
things, right?
Hmm.
So that's exactly the kind of stuff we see in Andor, where like it doesn't taint the original material. It really enhances it.
Yeah. Teaching moment for all
Mm.
of us.
Yes.
So I have a few more questions before we wrap up. So, um, Christian, you don't mind if we talk about the last scene,
Oh
right?
yeah, go for it.
So the last scene, Henry, is we see Cassian
Oh wait,
Andor.
hold on.
Mm,
Maybe we can ask Christian his guess as to what the last scene of the show is, because disclaimer, Christian actually hasn't seen the very end of
Yeah.
yeah.
season two.
So,
So
so
any guesses as to like what how it ends? Like the last scene?
Um, let's see. As a way to wrap everything up, I'm going to guess it's going to involve um hmm. I don't think it's going to end on a cameo quite like um Rogue One did, with Leia. I
mhm,
don't think it's to like and um I think it's going to be hmm it's going to involve Andor kind of flying off. He's going to have his robot, with him. It's going to be in a way that kind of sets up the crew for Rogue One. Um and so I think that it's almost like going to be a bit of a lighter moment to more or less kind of kick off the road, but kind of leave it on a bit of a lighter note, than the rest of the story has been.
mm,
Oh,
That kind of sets the idea that the rebellion is built on hope. It's
mm,
going to kind of come back to that central theme in a way, whether it's something like Luthen might say, or a way he kind of looks at the people around him and
mhm,
kind of sees kind of the family that's come out of this rebellion.
mm. I will
oh,
say
okay.
you're on the money. You're on the money. I'll say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I was about to
Um,
say that too, where you definitely see that. You definitely see the tie-in to Rogue One. You kind of get to see Andor ride off into the sunset on his final fatal mission, right? We all know what's going to happen.
uh,
But there is one scene after that that I don't know if anyone expected, really.
so the last scene is they're back on that planet that you see from like the first few episodes where like Bix and everyone was hiding out at, that farmland.
Hmm.
You go back to that planet and you see Bix. She's there and she's holding a baby.
Ah,
Dun
okay.
dun dun.
Dun,
Dun
dun,
dun
dun.
dun. And then it ends like that.
Oh, okay.
And so I'll ask you, Henry. You know, the the creator of the show really said that he wanted to end it on a happy note because, we all know the fate of what happens to Cassian Andor as he rides off. We've all seen Rogue One. And so he wanted to leave the viewers with a good happy note that Cassian Andor still lives through his son, through his baby. Sorry, I don't even know if it's his son, through his baby. Uh,
Yeah.
and Bix is holding their child, and that's how it ends. Um, I personally, I cried. I did not think that was a happy ending. I was so sad. I was like, Cassian died without knowing he had a kid. I mean, it's so happy that he does live, his spirit lives through his child, but I was just super sad knowing that Cassian never um got to see what his sacrifice meant, you know, that Bix, when she leaves in episode 9, she says that after the rebellion is over, after their fight is over, that they could get back together, but that never happens. And it's just sad to see that Cassian, I don't know if it's sad but happy that Cassian's sacrifice gives Bix and their child an opportunity to freedom, to happiness, to life. So it's bittersweet to me. It's not totally happy for me, but it's bittersweet.
Yeah, I can see that. It is sad knowing that Cassian didn't know he had a child, and it's sad that this child will have never met its father, right? But it kind of goes along really well with this like tragic love story angle I was mentioning before. Like, I love that dynamic already, but knowing now, oh, she's with child also, it's like, whoa, it really, you know, um, ups the ante on that. And I will also say, what a great freaking way to end the series, man. Like, it's totally unexpected. Like, that's so great because um, one thing in my mind with this show is like, oh, well, I mean, I know where it's gonna end up. I know Andor's not gonna die. I know Mon Mothma's not gonna die. I know all these things, right? So like as good as the show can be, I won't be truly surprised, right? Well, I was truly surprised here. And yes, it is sad, but it's also like an uplifting ending too, because um the spirit of Cassian Andor lives on through Bix and certainly through this child, right? And in terms of future Star Wars content, they could continue the story of Andor through this child, right? So a lot of
Y-
possibilities.
A lot of possibilities, future projects right there.
Yeah.
But you know how earlier I had said that a lot of fans really want to connect the dots, saying like, "Oh, Vel is this character from Rise of the Skywalker, or whatever." You know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of fans were like, "Oh, that's Poe," from the sequel
Mm-hmm.
trilogy.
Right.
And again, it just comes to like, oh my gosh, not every character that's Latino has to be related to these characters, you know?
Right. That's funny.
So my last question for this conversation is, um, this is the first show on IMDb to have 5 episodes, episode 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, to have a rating of 9.5 or higher.
Hmm.
Is it, I guess I'll ask you, Henry, since Christian has seen the last episodes, is that is that right? Is that correct? That it should?
Well, I would absolutely say that the show ends very well. I mean, the last half of the season is amazing. It's really great. It's great television. It's great Star Wars storytelling for sure. That said, you know, Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb ratings don't have the best track record, so I wouldn't go off of that so much. But in this case, yeah, I'll say I would go along with those ratings.
Cool, cool, cool. So, any last remarks or anything before we go into our ratings from either of you?
Let's see. Um, I guess. Well, let's see. Gotta give credit where credit's due. Um, Big producer on the series that we've talked about and gushed so much, Kathleen Kennedy. Kind of like
Mm.
the most hated woman in like Star Wars, kind of this lightning rod of hate
Hmm.
for many of the directions. But you see your name attached to this project, and like this is definitely, I think this is far and away the best Star Wars thing that we've seen since the original trilogy. So, and she's a producer on it. So I gotta say, shout out to Kathleen Kennedy
Good one.
for getting getting something as good as Andor made.
Good call. I had a question for you guys. So, like many, I did watch Rogue One immediately after watching Andor season two. And like I said, the movie is definitely enhanced through the show and is I think it's cool watching them back to back. I'll say that. One thing that I thought was kind of weird though is the KX droids,
Hmm.
right? So KXSO is the droid character in both uh Andor season 2 and Rogue One. And it's cool. You see his origin story, right?
Hmm.
Um he's originally like an basically an evil murderous uh Empire droid who becomes a good guy with the rebellion, right? The weird thing though is in Rogue One, KXSO is definitely um he's definitely not like invincible, right? He's literally killed by blaster shots
Hmm.
in Rogue One. But oddly, in Andor, the KX droids are like completely impervious to blasters, right? So why is that? Is that like a huge plot hole? Like, how did you guys make sense of that? Because I really couldn't make any sense of that.
No, yeah, I definitely caught that. Yeah, because like, Christian, there's like a scene where the droid gets into more action, trying to save Cassian. So there's like a bunch of blasters that hit him. And the only logical thing that I convinced myself to why that is because, he's a new droid, his armor is still fresh, and so by Rogue One, it's all worn out and stuff, so it's just more vulnerable to blaster shots. That's the only logical thing that I've convinced myself that that's why it is.
Hmm. Oh, that could be it. Um,
I don't buy
I think
it.
it could just be a retcon, you know?
As a retcon, yeah, I think so. Oh, sorry. The Alan Tudyk character is K2SO, but the series of droids are called the KX droids.
Yeah.
Slight
Could be that
correction.
you know, over time it just took so much damage, so that just happened to be the moment
Yeah.
where it
Okay.
just had taken so many shots that the armor just failed.
Okay. Okay.
It's a scrappy rebellion, they can't upkeep the droid the same way the Empire does, so over time, it didn't change the oil enough times. So over time, it just ran out.
Hmm.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Just a nitpicky thing. One other thing, big shout out. So we've been talking about characters who appeared in both Rogue One and Andor. And yes, there were a lot of absences. Um, but returning in Andor was the great Ben Mendelsohn playing Krennic. And
Hmm.
he is so awesome in Andor. Like he's only in a few episodes of season 2, but he is in full menacing Empire form. And like I think he's even better in Andor than Rogue One because Rogue One, he kind of takes a back seat to Grand Moff Tarkin and takes a back seat to Vader. But in Andor, he's the man. He's the main dude in charge. And there's this great scene where he completely dresses down Dedra and basically sends her to jail. And it is like an awesome performance. And yeah, like we've been talking a lot about how well the villains are developed in this series. Um, Ben Mendelsohn is awesome as Krennic. And like there's that one moment where he like presses his finger down on top of Dedra's head and is like it's just like it's so evil that I got I got I got chills, you know. Really cool.
You
So
know,
shout out to Ben Mendelsohn.
he improvised that scene.
Oh yeah. Oh,
It
that's so
was
cool.
he totally did on the spot. So seeing Deda's reaction to it is like her legit reaction. She did not expect that from
Oh,
him.
that's cool. That's probably why it came off so genuine. I'm like, dude, this guy is for real, man. Love it.
Cool. So, should we get into the ratings?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Christian, you want to start it off? After out of 5 stars, what would you give Cassian or Andor season 2?
Okay. I guess I'll give my rating for the whole show. Um, do well. I think Andor is a show that does deserve the full five. I think I said it a little earlier. I think this is definitely like the best piece of Star Wars media that we've probably seen since um the original trilogy. I think um this is so well beloved, and I think I think it has really great characters. It feels like adult Star Wars, which I think is also something a lot of fans have been asking for a long time. Um, it ha it definitely has the political intrigue, is the espionage, it's got the thriller aspect. It definitely tackles some more mature topics, and I think in all the right ways. It doesn't I don't think it really stumbles in any parts, even though I would say my biggest nitpick is that especially in the early parts of both seasons, they're definitely on the slow side, probably a little too slow at times, but I think they're always kind of building to um, kind of much bigger moments later on, and you do got to appreciate that it does take its time and it tells the story that it wants to tell. So I'll give it the full 5 out of 5. I think it deserves it. I think this is probably could say this is probably the best show on Disney Plus as a whole. Probably the big show, if not one of the best shows on Disney Plus. And like I said, the best, if not one of the best pieces of Star Wars content that we've seen since the original trilogy.
Mhm. Some big words there, Christian, but you're right on track. So, what about you, Henry?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Christian. Um, the show is like grounded adult Star Wars, which is so refreshing, and the writing is great, the acting is great. A lot of great tension. Like I had mentioned before, this is a thriller, you know? Um, a little light on action, a little slow at times, but when it gets dramatic, you'll get they'll get plenty of thrills in this one. There's a lot of entertainment here. Uh, Social commentary is through the roof. There is so much real world stuff in this show. So relevant, so timely. Great stuff. As we've been saying, I will go a little lower though. I'm gonna do a 4 out of 5, and it's because of the slow start to the season. And it's not just like the very beginning either. I feel like the first full half is pretty slow. And I think a lot of fat could have been trimmed from the first half of the season. I'm talking 6 episodes. Like, this is a significant part of the season. Um, that whole thing at the beginning where Andor's dealing with that like group of incompetent rebels, I'm like, let's move on already. There was a really extended sequence of Mon Mothma's daughter's wedding. I felt like there was way too much time there. Like I was pretty bored with a lot of that. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna lower my rating down a notch because of that slow first half. That said, I did want to call out that dance scene we were talking about earlier. I didn't get to chime in because I gotta say that song, I believe it's called Niamos, is a fucking banger. It's so good. And I want to disagree with Christian, who said it was like too long of a scene. I could have used more, man. I thought it was awesome. The song is great. And yes, it's the first time we see someone get drunk in Star Wars. It's the first time we get an EDM banger in Star Wars. It's the first time we see a disco ball droid DJ in Star Wars. It's so fucking cool. Um, if it hasn't happened already, someone's got to have this at like a con post party or an actual wedding. I'm making the call now. This is gonna happen somewhere. Maybe Star Wars celebration post party or someone's Star Wars themed wedding. They're gonna recreate this scene, and it's gonna be awesome. And yeah, so on that note, like after that scene, the show starts to pick up, and yes, the second half of the scene is second half of the season is pure awesomeness. 4 out of 5 for Andor season 2.
Okay. Christian Henry's just being a hater. That's why he's giving 4 out of 5. But we still love you, Henry. So It might not come to surprise, but I give this a 5 out of 5. I watched this twice already. It is such a great show. The writing is so good. The actors are phenomenal at what they do. Yes, I agree that the first half of season 2 is slow. I told both of you guys that, but I am willing to look over it because the second half, it just sets it it continues from the first part of season 2, and it's just so good. It's such a social commentary on what is going on in today's times. Um, it sets up perfectly to Rogue One. It's just phenomenal on every aspect. I cried and cried and cried. It's just such a good show, and I just hope in the future I could forget how good the show is and then rewatch it and then just be like, enjoy it all over again. It's such a great show. So I easily give this a 5 out of 5. And with that, um, what did we say again at the end?
I can wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay.
With that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Porfirio, and Christian.